much. I appreciate it. Saga. Mary, your words are always kind and what I deserve. So thank you very much. Scott is right. California is in desperate need of change, and I fully support and endorse him in his fight to take on what has been a disastrous last several years that Katie Porter's business. And the federal government, when it all comes down to it, really has no role in education. And I look forward to him getting out there and fighting for California to keep the resources here and making sure that we're doing what we can so we have school choice and the ability for parents to make decisions. And also, we shouldn't be beholden to what other states are deciding in terms of students who go to college in different places but are held back because of their race or nationality or language barriers. So Scott's going to be a great champion for all of us in Congress, and appreciate that he's on with us tonight. My name, again, is Lance Christensen. I work as a policy executive dealing with education every single day of my life. I work to help empower parents and to make sure that they have the resources and access necessary so their kids can get the best education opportunities afforded them. I have 5 kids, and all of my 5 kids are different. My oldest is not like my second, is not like my third or fourth or fifth. They are different. And as a parent, I understand that I can't just have one size fits education for them, but it needs to be individualized. And for far too long, our state government has created what I like to call a conveyor belt system in a warehouse, where it used to be we created robots as students, put little kids at 5 or 6 years old in kindergarten onto a conveyor belt, push go, and sent them down the line and hope that by the time they got to 12th grade, that they would have an adequate education. And what we have found is that's not the case. And many of you have experienced this in California, either as a student yourself or as a parent or a grandparent possibly. And as I look forward, California was supposed to be the innovative leader of the 21st century. We were promised flying cars by now, and we can barely get kids to go to school and to show up. For instance, in Los Angeles Unified School District, which is the second largest district in the state of California, in 2004, we had 750,000 students in that district, 750,000 kids. When they did the count last year, it was down to 435,000 students. That's a loss of 42% of the kids in that. It's amazing. It's even better or worse, depending on your perspective. Just on the first day of school this year, they lost 50,000 students in their public school system. So imagine going from being one of the best and brightest school districts in the entire country just a few generations ago to where literally 500,000 parents of students have decided they're going to move. It's stunning. And that's what's happening across the state as well. A lot of kids are leaving and going to homeschool or private school or moving out of the state entirely. And I'm all for choice, but the state of California's constitution guarantees every child in the state of California a free public education. And what we're doing is providing a free education, except that it's not a high quality public education. The Supreme Court of the United States just a few years back actually said that the Constitution, while guaranteeing a free education, does not guarantee a free, high quality public education. So we have a problem. And Mary had noted this statistic earlier. We're 50th in literacy in the entire country. We're behind all our states, including the poorest state, Mississippi, which is actually one of the few states to improve its reading scores recently. In fact, it did it without more money. In California, we're spending $128.6 billion this year in education, K through 12. That means we're spending $23,000 per kid. And if you're in a regular public school, the average classroom size is 25 students. So think about it. We're spending $575,000 per classroom per year. Is that a classroom that's living up to its expectations? Are we paying good teachers a good salary? Are we making sure that kids have excellent resources and desks and computers and access to facilities that are worthy of the taxpayer dollar? And I think all of us would say, no, that's not what's happening. And in fact, many of you may be going to other schools because your local public school is not delivering on its promises. But that doesn't just happen at the top. The federal government has very little to say, except that it sends lots of money to the state with lots of strings attached, as Scott was talking about. The state sends that money on with lots of strings attached as well. A few years ago, they tried to change it, what they called the local control funding formula. The idea was to simplify education spending and give more flexibility and discretion at the local school board level. What has happened over the last few years is the legislature continues to pile on new rules and regulations about how that money can be spent. So any flexibility that school districts had for a long time is almost gone. And in fact, many school districts will complain about the amount of paperwork that they have to complete, and yet they can't spend that time really evaluating good teachers or getting rid of bad teachers. In the state of California, we have 319,000 public school teachers. Many of them are very good people, well-intended. They believe that teaching is a noble profession, as do I. But they are in the same category and paid the same amount of money as other people who are not as good as teachers and are protected by the teachers union. And most of those teachers who are in the union pay about $1,000 a year in union dues. Now, just do the math. 300,000 plus public school teachers paying $1,000 a year. That's $300 million every year that comes into the California Teachers Association and other teachers unions throughout the state. That means that's $300 million times 2 over an election season they can use for elections and politics, lobbying, advocacy, many things which are against parents' wishes and actually don't support teachers or students. And so in this day and age, we have a system that's broken and we want to fix it. So I decided after writing the school choice initiative with a group of other people that because we couldn't get on the ballot, it was time to have a discussion at the top. And that person in the state of California is called the Superintendent of Public Instruction. And before tonight, probably few of you had ever heard of this position, but it's original to the 1849 Constitution. And what happened is they made it an independent elected official that's nonpartisan at the same level as the governor, attorney general, secretary of state, or lieutenant governor, because we wanted somebody who would be independent from those forces. We wanted somebody who was in for our schools. And so I decided to put because I have a plan. We can take our schools back and have accountability and have some good leadership by the state. That thing will work out as it needs. And so my plan is one is the first day I would hire a chief parent advocate, somebody who would be there to advocate for parents. Right now, there's nobody in that position in the state capitol or in the Department of Education. The superintendent of public instruction has, in his capacity, is also the executive director of the education department, which has 2,400 bureaucrats working for him. He also sits on the board of education, which determines your curriculum and sometimes discipline and other issues. And he also sits on the Commission for Teacher Credentialing, which means when you have a terrible teacher, the commission is supposed to take action and protect the students in the schools from these teachers. Right now, it's failing in all those aspects. And that's because there's no leadership coming from the superintendent, but he also is not hearing the voices of the parents. So it leads to number 2. The state bureaucracy is so massive, not just the Department of Education, but all of its other ancillary parts. And most of that's because of a huge education code that most people can't navigate. And again, if we're spending $128.6 billion on education K through 12 this year, it means that there's a lot of money going out that nobody has any responsibility or accountability for. And so I would do of the education code and of the budget. I think it's time to think about the kids. What are these expenses? What are these expenditures for? And how can we make sure they go to the kids' benefit, not just for the adults or bureaucrats or special interests? And then number 3, I love what Scott said about federalism and about the idea of bringing power back to the locals. So let's go one step further. Rather than just getting it back to the state, let's also take it back to the districts too. Let's sure that the districts have full power and authority and discretion over what their budget looks like, how much curriculum they can and can't do, what kind of activities they can do to protect their students, make sure that schools are safe, make sure also that students are able to be disciplined in a wise and fruitful manner so that we keep kids out of prison. I think that's a pretty important thing. And I'll finish on this note. Right now in California, we have 2,500 school board openings. That means there's a lot of really good people running for office to try to take back their school boards. Mary Barkey was one of those people at the Board of Education level in Orange County. I'm supporting those that support parental rights and advocate for our kids and their choice in education. And if we can get a lot of them going together, which we have, I've endorsed over 150 school board candidates right now. If we can have them marching and knocking on doors and talking to parents, we can win this race. And because of people like Saga, who's organized this tonight and has been a huge supporter of mine, we're going to be able to make sure that we can get voices heard from the parents and from the students. And so thank you for having me tonight, and I look forward to taking any questions.